Hello, I'm Kim Sauer for ScoopTalk, and I'm joined today by an interesting group of panelists, and we're going to be talking about the PCB supply chain, the opportunities and the challenges. So I'm going to start with you, Alun. From the point of view of the EIPC, could you give us a snapshot of what the industry looks like at the moment?
Yeah, if we look at the numbers, the volumes in PCBs made in Europe, it's been pretty static the last few years, to be quite honest. Although, certainly the market is growing to a degree. What we found, though, is many companies in Europe have found partners on all sides. I mean, I have to say, from the point of view of raw material supply, also partners in the same business. So a board shop in Europe may well find a partner in Asia or somewhere else in order to offer a full product range to their customers. So, for example, a board shop may have prototyping capabilities in Europe. They may be close to an OEM, which is very advantageous, but they can't really scale it for volume, so they need to have someone to work with them. We've seen a lot of that going on in the last few years. In fact, I think most of the larger manufacturers in Europe now do have at least some relationship with somebody else, somewhere else in the world. And I think if I was to sort of think about the market in total, we'd think about the assembly side of the business too. There's a lot of that around Europe, around the periphery of main, let's say Central Europe anyway, because Europe is a huge market for electronics. We shouldn't forget that. It's the biggest market in the world, even larger than North America if we take the full European Union countries. So actually, people want to sell into this market, but the issues we face are challenges of cost and supply chain, I guess. Supply chain for materials is difficult in Europe now. We were at Circuit Foil earlier in the year. They're the last copper foil manufacturer that's in Europe now. And copper foil, we may talk about later. Copper foil presents its own challenges for the market. Think of the glass fabric suppliers. There's none left in Europe either anymore. There used to be many of them. Resin manufacturing. So a lot of the basic raw materials have moved away. So these are having to be imported into Europe, fabricated in Europe, and then sold, of course, into the market. So I think we have to see Europe as being a place where design is done and consumption is happening. But the manufacturing part now is not all done in Europe. The manufacturing is to some degree outside of Europe. Sometimes it can be in former Eastern countries, which is on the assembly side, but certainly increasingly for the PCB manufacturing, most people I see have a partner outside. And so I guess if we're in this business, you're in a supply chain business now rather than purely a manufacturing business. I think that is a very important part of the story. And I guess my colleagues here would concur on that. They're different sides of the business.
Well, supply chain is our whole business outside of Asia. Manufacturing, R&D, everything like this is done in Asia. We have some small manufacturing for fast turn, for quick turn, but that's also part of the supply chain story because everybody wants everything quick outside of Asia, and then they want the volume from Asia now, and you have to be able to meet both ends of that equation. And interestingly, you're talking about design. What we're seeing a lot with the metal back material, there's a lot of automotive lighting work going on in Europe, and we're working as the material manufacturer because a lot of the IP, of course, is in the material and the converters, but the converters are largely in Asia, but we have to have a presence in Europe to talk to the guys that are designing the boards. There is some startup manufacturing here and end-of-life manufacturing, but the bit in the middle is all done in the Far East.
But that's an interesting point because you're actually, although you're a materials supplier or a manufacturer, you're actually interacting with your clients in that design stage and then making sure that the product supply, that supply chain is managed afterwards in accordance with the demands of...
Well, supply chain integrity is part of that as well. People want to be sure that they're getting the material they're specifying. And that's, so for example now, we're taking actual material orders in Europe, but delivering and invoicing in Europe, but delivering material into Asia for conversion into end products.
That is a good point actually, because certainly when an OEM designs a product and works with a local manufacturer to get the prototypes made, when the next stage comes in the manufacturing, either scale up or volume production, he wants to be absolutely sure it's the same material and the same process employed. So that's a huge job and a huge challenge for board manufacturers to make sure when they do go to a partner, they can actually guarantee that it's the same quality of product, the same process and the same material. And actually in the past, I think that has been a huge challenge. I think now people are becoming quite expert at it, but that has been a massive change. And I've certainly in the past seen cases where a project scaled up and then suddenly things go wrong because some small change has been made, a difference in material, a difference in suppliers of raw materials, or a difference in process, in fact, and then suddenly things don't work as they did. So I think as a custodian of the supply chain, let's say the guy who takes responsibility for the whole chain, as you might do actually, in your business, has to be sure that you can make sure that the customer gets the product which is the same, whether it's 5 units or 50,000 units.
Sure, and I guess like you said, it's very important to be close to the customer, also from the consulting point of view, from the product introduction phase. And to do this, we have to have some manufacturing force locally in Europe to be able to then go globally, to have a volume, to have other kind of services, but to be here is important. As you mentioned, the market is here, is growing. Unfortunately, the production, if you talk of PCB, about half of the market size has gone outside Europe in terms of production. And what we can keep here, and we have to keep here, is production which is related to some difficulties, to some know-how, where we can really interact with the customer, offer a solution for a high-frequency solution, for a thermal management, for a miniaturization. This is what we can still keep here and develop here.
Yeah, because you've, Cicor being a Swiss headquartered company, obviously you've come from the European perspective as opposed to the Asian perspective into Europe. So yeah. What would the differences of approaches be as a business then for you, if I can start with you?
Yeah, we have most of the product interaction and first contact with customer out of Europe or also in the North America in some cases. But then if the customer need production in Asia or a scale up for higher quantities, then we can offer a global presence with production in Asia or in Eastern Europe. We have a factory in Romania. So it's important to be global active, but we have our strength also here, where we know the customer, where we have the possibility to consult and to offer a solution, especially in the high-tech part of the market.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, we started 10 years ago. We were, Ventec's own in-house distributor of Ventec's products. That was our job 10 years ago. Our job now is to work with OEMs. It's to get products specified into projects, and then manage the supply chain wherever that is. So that could be some production here, but increasingly, we're working in Asia. We have an OEM team now that is with a global footprint. And the manufacturing can take place anywhere. Yeah. Small quantity is usually in the overseas, what we call the overseas market, so Europe and the USA. Series quantity in Asia, and it's piecing all of this together. And as Alan said, making sure the customers get the same products every time in every market, in every region. And it's not straightforward, but it can be done. But you need a presence. You need to have a presence everywhere to manage this. You need people who speak the same language. You need people who understand the business culture, because all of this influences the way the supply chains work. I mean, that's my experience, and it's been a learning curve for 10 years as well. But for me, my job now is more about supply chains than it is about materials. We have technicians, we have great production people. They look after materials. I look after supply chains, and that starts from the OEM at one end, right the way through to moving a 18 by 24 panel of material from wherever to wherever at the right cost and at the right time and at the right quality.
Yeah.
I think from the EIPC perspective, of course, I mean, we are a European body. We represent the needs of our members in Europe, and we try to promote electronics in Europe. That's our aim. Of course, we are part of the World Electronic Circuit Council, which links across all the associations across the world. So I was last month in Taiwan. I might be next month in Hong Kong. We'll certainly be in China in March. We'll certainly be in Korea for the World Convention in April. So actually, we're able to actually reach out to other associations and other bodies. We actually have this week an association, a trade association from Taipei in Munich, actually looking for partners for both buying and selling. So it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street very much. And I think that's something that we can do. We can help facilitate that, and we have done a lot more of that in the recent years. I think the first trade mission we had to China was probably going back 15 years ago, and we do many of these now. We do find partners. We try to find partners for our members, because I think it's one thing to put your head in the sand and say, okay, we're going to do everything ourselves. Those days are gone. I think we have to understand our positioning now, what you do and what you do well, and try to do that. But then find a partner for the things you can't do or the things you don't want to do. And I think that way we can really make the supply chain work well. And that's been a big part of our business the last few years. We've certainly found a big push from our members saying, look, we need to find someone to help us. Can you recommend somebody? Can you introduce us?
I fully agree with that. I mean, if you look at things like what the airline industry did with code sharing, what the motor manufacturers do with, some make engines, some make, and they share all these
share
things.
Platforms.
And I think more and more of this is going to happen, because look, you can't do everything.
And it's happening throughout the industry. We're seeing it on all levels within the supply chain of electronics manufacturing. Just as a final discussion point, can we just focus in on some of the key trends you're seeing within the markets that are going to be shaping your product offering, your product development for the future, and just see if that fits in with some of the research you've done also for the European market. So what are you seeing in the market at the moment? What are your customers asking for?
Well, for us in the market we are serving, and one of them is the medical market, we see more and more the trend to miniaturization, which is not new, but with the new development also in direction of wearable, of Internet of Things, and so on, it's becoming more and more important to be able to offer electronics in small spaces with a high level of functionality. Yeah. And this is what we are trying to do with our technology, especially in the substrates with PCB technology. We can offer this kind of miniaturization.
And that obviously has impact also on the type of materials you'd have for the actual PCB. Then.
Miniaturization, the key thing is we're seeing thinner and thinner materials. We're seeing lighter copper weights on everything. Increasingly we're being asked to supply 12, 9, 5 micron. We're having a discussion. Actually, I think it might be with you guys about 3 micron copper, which is a stretch right now. Exactly. But we're seeing those kind of things. Thermal management is another key driver for us, and not just the LED lighting business and the automotive lighting business. We're now starting to see things like e-motors in cars, multi-layer build-ups where people need to get heat out. They don't want to use thermal vias, or they want to use thermal vias, but also thermally conductive materials. All of this stuff is starting to happen. So we're starting to take, let's say, the building blocks of the products we've got and reconfigure them to make new products to meet those requirements, like our A-series IMS, which really is a business that is now a very relatively low-end business in the prepreg glass reinforced IMS business. But if you can make thermally conductive prepregs, you can make thermally conductive cores, you can make thermally conductive multi-layer build-up. Now this is a much more interesting business, and we're seeing more and more of that, multi-layer constructions being bonded to a piece of aluminium, very hybridized products, and this is another trend, and that's very much a Western business, not an Asian business yet.
Alan, is that reflective of what your members are telling you, what your research?
Yeah, I mean, we could think about what Europe specialises in, and we've heard about medical, we've heard about automotive, we know these things, and defence, of course. But for me, though, what's most interesting is actually Internet of Things. I mean, Michele mentioned this, and I think when you think about this, we're talking about billions of devices and billions of connected devices, but not just connected devices, but also smart devices. And there are some large research projects in Europe run by Fraunhofer IZM, for example, looking at miniaturization of devices, but not just actually building them one at a time, building them en masse, so building them on panels, testing on panels, because the key thing is these things must cost a few dollars. They mustn't cost a few tens of dollars, a few dollars, and that is a huge challenge to make something very functional that can be built by machine, not by hand, by machine, in billions and billions. And I think that's going to open a huge market. The estimate is that IoT will count for 10 times the total value chain of electronics today, 10 times bigger than we are today. So $60 billion times 10. It's a huge number. I mean, who knows this will be delivered, but actually we're seeing it. These sensors are coming along, but the challenges of making these at the right price point is a huge technical challenge. And the thing that's happening a lot now is the intelligence is going into the device. So rather than passing data back and forth over the internet, which of course the bandwidth will be a huge restriction, the device itself decides. The camera says, okay, I can see something ahead, it's a person. We better put the brakes on. You don't want to actually, go to the internet and say, okay, let's see, is it a person? Should I put the brakes on the car? If you wait for that time lag, then the person's already dead. So the device itself decides, and that is a huge trend we're seeing. So I'm very excited by it. I have to say, I think we're going to.
And it's kind of related. We're working with a customer at the moment that's an LED lighting customer that's looking to put connectivity into the lighting units. So the lighting units become part of the network for picking up and
they will. All devices become connected. You've got antenna on chip now. That's a new technology trend, and this is all going to happen. So everything will talk to itself, and it'll make autonomous decisions. And that is, I think, the key change. Rather than a human deciding, these things will be not sort of controlled by us, but for our benefit, for our use, and they will decide things for us to make our lives better. And I think we're going to find a huge move there. Medical is one good example, but there's so many others, and the potential, I think, is huge. So I'm looking forward to these the next few years when this thing really gets moving.
An exciting future, and as you mentioned, it's very important to be there at the beginning of that whole design process, be involved with the customer and develop those products with them. And that goes back to your partnership emergence or model that you're seeing in the market. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been very interesting, and I hope to see you next time at a show as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.